I was particularly interested in the fact that the language in chapter 23 where Abraham purchased the field from Ephron, I believe it was, at the city gate, was similar to the language where David purchases a field, a threshing floor, in Chronicles. There's also an account in Samuel. I think it's in the end of 1 Samuel. But I noticed the language was similar. When Abraham buys the field, the men of the city they go out of their way to offer I believe the way they worded it is the best of their sepulchres to Abraham. And Abraham then he asked for a specific field with a cave in it, and the owner happened to be there at the gate of the city, and he offers to give Abraham the field just as the others had done, and they had great regard for Abraham. And if you look in the Chronicles account of where David numbers the army of Israel, that David is given a choice of three choices. He actually asks the Lord to take away his sin, and then Nathan the prophet comes to him and offers him three choices, and he chooses the third option, which is he says he doesn't want to fall into the hand of man, but into the hand of the Lord, and that choice was 3 days of pestilence and the sword of the Lord. And so there was a 3-day plague, and many people died. And on the third day, David saw an angel, and I believe the way it says it, suspended between heaven and earth with a drawn sword ready to strike Jerusalem. David says, "Let this be upon me and upon my father's house." And then the Lord tells David to build an altar and offer a sacrifice, where the angel was suspended up above a threshing floor, and I believe it was Ornan the Jebusite. And so David then goes to the threshing floor, and he asks if he can purchase the threshing floor to build an altar and offer the sacrifice. And you'll notice that Ornan offers to give him the threshing floor, and the language is just very similar to when Abraham wanted to buy the burying place for Sarah. And so David then says no. He says, I'm not going to offer to the Lord that which cost me nothing. And so David pays him the full price of the burying place, and Abraham does the same thing. He pays the full price, and it's interesting in the account in Genesis. The account really goes out of its way to make it clear that the purchase was legal, and that the elders of the city were, in agreement that this was now sold to Abraham. But Abraham, one point that he made is that this threshing floor was for the dead. It was not for himself to profit in some way in this life. It was for Sarah's gravesite. There was a cave in the field, and so Sarah was buried in the cave. And we actually find out later in Genesis that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and Rachel and Leah were buried there as well. Rebecca was buried, I think, near Bethlehem. But so I was wondering. I have come to believe that when there's a similar wording like that, that the reader is intended to look at the two accounts and try to understand why the similarity in language, and I believe that there is a very strong connection between the two accounts, but there's one thing though that isn't the same. That the field that Abraham purchased was at a different location than the threshing floor that David purchased. And the threshing floor that David purchased was, of course, Mount Moriah. And when David offered the sacrifice, it says the Lord accepted the sacrifice by fire. And then when that happened, David right away knew what that meant. And the very next verses, it says David gathered. He made the statement. He says, "This is the house of the Lord." And that statement of David is reflecting back to a statement in Deuteronomy that says that when Israel comes to a time of peace, the reference in Deuteronomy that mentions that Israel, when they come into Canaan, that they haven't come to rest yet. When they first come into Canaan, they will have to subdue the Canaanites, and that period lasted from Joshua until David. And the statement is made, it's picked up in the New Testament in Corinthians 15, and it's mentioned in the Psalms that David reigned until he put all enemies under his feet. So that period of warfare ran from Joshua until David, and the period of peace then, you might say, David ushered in by bringing the Canaanites into subjection. So the Deuteronomy reference to the period of peace, the way it says it, it says that when you come into the land, don't think that you've come to the rest that you look for, but in a time of peace, the Lord will choose a place amongst one of your tribes, and there you'll bring your sacrifices. So that reference is pointing to this incident where David numbers the armies of Israel. And when David numbers the armies of Israel, it says that he was afraid to go up to the tabernacle during that 3-day period. So